Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's now look at the second part of this lesson on the Articles of Confederation, what we're calling a doomed alliance. Quick little background here. So America won the Revolutionary War, as we all know. Everybody say yay. There we go. And you know you said it at home, don't worry. Now, this occurs in 1783 is when we have the official signing of the Treaty of Paris. So we have Britain's control is no more. They're gone. They're out of America. And now the Continental Congress, who, if you remember, they're the group that's been really organizing the revolution and doing a lot with that, they now need to pick a government that they're going to use. So how will they pick? Well, given that we've been talking about this whole scale of anarchy versus authoritarianism, let's think about where was Britain? And when you look at it from an American perspective, we're going to say, hey, they're really high up there and being very, very authoritarian. Maybe not at the tip top, but they're getting up there. Some things we can look at, the Intolerable Acts. When you think about some of the things that were included in the Intolerable Acts, man, are they bad. You know, think about the fact, and the Quartering Act is written there, they have soldiers that are now in people's homes. That's very, very rare and very odd, especially from a modern perspective. They also are shutting down a harbor. They're making it so that the people in Boston and in Massachusetts cannot pick their government leaders. They're really changing the way that justice is provided for people by making it so that courts aren't even really active in America. Whenever it's a British person, they actually, or a British official, they're going to go back to Britain. Those things are major, major damages to the rights of people. And if we just want to put it really simply here, and I'm going to put just the letters here, so we have F for freedom here at the bottom, and then up at the top we have the S for security. These are all in the sake of security, right? Making sure that people aren't bypassing the law and doing things like that. So those Intolerable Acts, they're pretty bad. Quartering Act, as we already mentioned, and the writs of assistance, that's the ability of people to search other people's stuff here. We have British officials being able to search the ships of all colonial merchants and really anybody who had a boat here in America. Those are things that are all taking away people's freedom in terms of trying, or for the point of trying to help them to be more secure. The Articles of Confederation that are formed are, well, on the other side of this. So when you look at the first government that our founding fathers, and I shouldn't really say the founding fathers only, but people in America tried to create, it's way different than Britain's. Why? It's because they're rebelling. It's kind of like the kid who says, oh, when I'm older and I have my own kids, I'm not going to do that to my kids. I'm going to be way cooler and let them do this and that, and they talk a big game. Why? Well, it's because they're angry, because they feel like they're not being treated right. We're going to see that it changes around, just like you probably will if you have said that before. So, our quick little warm-up here. What were the Founding Fathers looking for in this new government? What do they want to include? What do they not want to include? You know, like, for instance, did they want to have a lot of taxes? What do you think? Yes or no? Some other things to think about. Did they want to have a lot of freedom or not a lot of freedom? Did they want to be in people's lives a lot or not? Did they want to have somebody who's like a king? Or do they think that that type of a leader wasn't needed? Things to think about. Our targets for today. First, I can identify powers and non-powers of the Articles of Confederation, and second, I can explain why the Articles of Confederation was made weak. So that's really, I should maybe say were made weak. But this is the design of our government. Why was it weak? Let's first start with this, the Founding Fathers. This is one of those assumptions that as a teacher you sometimes make, and I just want to make sure it's clear. The Founding Fathers are the men who helped to create our new government. They wrote the Declaration of Independence, they helped to write the Constitution, which will come up very soon. These are really, really important people in our government. People like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, the Adams. I mean, we're going to look at a lot of different people like that. Let's talk about the state governments here. Because when we look at what governments did exist whenever Britain left, there already were state governments. That's important to understand. So Virginia had its own government, Pennsylvania had its own government. They had been intact for a long time. They're the ones that are actually the most important to the people and the most powerful as well. This is a little bit different in the modern times because I don't think that anybody here is going to say that Pennsylvania can overpower the United States government. Without a doubt, we don't have that ability today. However, back in the day, that's really how it was in the earliest stages of our country. Each state had their own constitution, which spelled out the rights of all their citizens and set limits on government power. So these already existed in the states. They had a legislature, executives, all kinds of different things. These won't make sense to you just yet, but wait a week and they will, whenever we talk about the legislative and executive branches. So they already had all that stuff. So what did we actually need in America? Well, what we needed was a type of government that could kind of oversee what's going on in all the colonies, and now really what they're going to be called are all the states. So, the Articles of Confederation itself was actually written during the Revolutionary War in 1777, created by the Continental Congress, and there was a lot of fighting over it. Basically, all that it was trying to do is what I mentioned previously, was connect the states. So we can make it so that we can have this connection between the states where they'll have to work together to some extent because we want to do that. Their biggest fear, though, was they didn't want to replace one tyranny with another. In other words, they don't want to change and get rid of Britain and put in a new government in America that's just like Britain's. So, what did they have in this government? All that it was a very simple Congress, which is basically just a group of people, and each person had, or each state, excuse me, had one vote in Congress. So each state sends one representative. They meet together here in this Congress, and they could do certain things. Here are the powers, and this is where you need to start putting this into your note guide here. And do you think that these are really authoritative types of powers? Are they more representative powers, or are they more like an anarchy? Keep that in mind as we're going through this. I want you to write these down as we go. 9 of 13 states had to agree to pass any law, important to recognize, so you need to have a lot of people to do anything. It's not like you just have to have a majority, which would be 7. You had to have all the way up to 9, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult to pass any laws or to do anything else. Here's what they could do. There are 3 big powers. Number 1, they could declare war. They could declare war. So pick a spot, put it in where you think it falls here. I didn't say that they could actually do anything with the war. I said they could declare war. Keep that in mind. They can't build an army. Number 2, they could appoint military officers. They could pick who's going to be their general, kind of like how they picked that George Washington would be the general and the head of the Continental Army. And third, they could coin money, which literally means they could create a type of money that could be used in the colonies. Okay, like we have our dollars and cents and quarters, nickels, dimes, all that good stuff. They're saying you could actually create a monetary system. The reality is it's super, super weak, though. The real power was in the states because things that were reserved as being only state powers are the following. Number 1, it could not tax. So a non-power being that it could not tax. Do you think that the lack of taxing means that it's more authoritarian or more of an anarchy? So for the federal government, in other words, the Articles of Confederation or the United States as they were, for them to get any money to do anything, they had to ask the states for money. Envision how that's going to work out when Georgia says no if you're Pennsylvania or if you're somebody like Massachusetts. Second, they couldn't do anything to regulate trade. The states just had to work out all their problems on their own. Maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. There was no system to settle disputes between states. So states just did their own thing and resolved everything on their own. And there was no president or king. There's no head of this. All that it is each state has one representative, and they just work together. And by the way, one thing I really should imply here too is this idea of not taxing. That's why they can't have a military, because who's going to give them a military? You got it. They're going to have to ask the states. So basically there's a federal government that has to ask the states for everything. Could you imagine that today? President Obama saying, okay, states, we need tax money, we need a military, we need this, we need that. Is that going to work out very well? I would say probably not. And again, what's their big fear? Their big fear is they didn't want to give King George the Third the boot. In other words, we're talking about the King George from Britain, and replace him with a new King George. Yes, but we got it. Nice little joke there. So you get the idea. Now, this is going to cause a lot of problems in our country. So like, let's imagine, like, hey, we need some tax money to pay off our war debts, which was a real issue that they actually had to do, because remember, they got loans from Spain and some other countries. They asked the states, and the states say no. Then Washington says, we really need that money, though. They said, let me think about it. No. Ugh, not fun. So, a little bit of mental sweat. We're going to come back to the rest of this tomorrow. Did the creators of the Articles of Confederation do a good job? In other words, the Continental Congress, did they do a good job with this or not? Think about it. Write down your answers, by the way, on the second sheet of your note guide, okay? Second, what were the biggest mistakes they made? What do you think should have been done differently? Third, what score would you give the Articles of Confederation on our -5 to 5 scale? So -5 to +5. Is this more authoritarian, more of an anarchy? In fact, even write it in on the scale that you have on the sheet where you were writing in the teacher names. Where is the ideal government on that scale? If you could pick one spot to put a government, like, where would you want to be on that scale? And finally, where are we today? If you look at modern America, where do we fit on that scale? Are we -5, 0, 5, +3, -2? Where do we fit? Think about that. That's all for this lesson, though. Make sure you have that all ready to go for tomorrow, for our lesson moving forward here. Okay? I hope that made sense.